Flame on! How's everybody doing tonight? Well, the time of this recording, I only episodes 1 through 4. If you're seeing this in the future, that means due to some scheduling conflict or because of what I had personally going on in my life, these recordings were delayed. At the time, this video came out late, I should say. Now, I just want to go ahead and get this out of the way. That I just want to go ahead and get this out of the way. That we're going to focus on Ahsoka episodes 1 to 4. Now, as I said before, I ended up having to edit this in post, that we will be covering episodes 1 through 4. So anything farther than that will be in part 2, which should come out within the next coming weeks, and then I'll do a final video orchestrating my thoughts, or I may decide to make it a separate segment when we get to part 2. I haven't decided yet. For right now, let's focus on episodes 1 to 4. Now, episode 1 pretty much starts with like the aftermath of the Return of the Jedi. We then cut to roughly 10 years after the Return of the Jedi defeated Palpatine and pretty much the end of the Galactic Civil War. So roughly 10 years. And we have the big ceremony. We have Sabine Wren, our Mandalorian character from Rebels. And does Ahsoka work as a season 5 of Rebels, or at least, I mean, if you don't have that supplemental information, you're not going to know who's who or what's going on. But I can definitely see if you had actually watched Clone Wars or Rebels, or even both, especially both, you would have had much stronger of an emotional impact. But that we will get to later. But Sabine pretty much ditches the ceremony. She's a complete no-show. And then when when New Republic envoys try to find her, she pretty much plays a game of speeder chicken with them, and dashes off into the desert. So she goes to her little hut with her little product placement merchandise pet, brooding and lamenting over the war and Ezra. And I'm not going to go too much into spoilers, but a lot of contextual information stems from Rebels and the events of that series. So if you're going into this blind or just for the titular character Ahsoka, either you have to take the time to actually catch up on the show prior, or you're just going to be, I'm not going to say you're going to be completely lost. You're just not going to have the emotional investment, I'll say. Anyway, so making a long story short, Ahsoka is fighting off the Imperial remnants of Thrawn, or at least investigating the Imperial remnants of the Empire. And now they have this MacGuffin to where they can traverse a new galaxy or a new quadrant of the galaxy. And to basically what the MacGuffin they use in Force Awakens with the star map to find Luke, but it's on a grander scale. And some of the ridiculousness you're going to find over the course of the series, it ties back to Rebels to a degree, but even then it's a little wacky. Anyway, so find the MacGuffin, or at least what they appear to be a chance to find. Well, it could just be one big conspiracy theory. Ahsoka doesn't want to leave any chances. So she takes it to, so under the encouragement of Hera, she takes it for Sabine to take a look at it, and the motivation of seeing Ezra again. Now, I do want to go ahead and get this out right now. At least from what I've seen, there is no retcon or any alludement towards Ezra having conflicting feelings or reflection or rediscovery of emotions or feelings after Ezra's big sacrifice in Rebels. If you hadn't seen the show, just know that Ezra had pulled a sacrifice play in the attempt to take Thrawn from whatever planet they were fighting on, and which was a huge benefit to the rebellion. So that's all you really need to know about Rebels. If you hadn't seen it, I just spoiled a big plot point for you towards the end of the show. I apologize. But by the time this goes live, Rebels would have already been ended for the past 5-6 years anyway. So if you hadn't even watched the show, you would have found a clip of it at some point. So I hate to be that crude, but if I really went through an entire recap of Rebels, we'd be here for at least an hour and a half. So, excuse me. Now, basically, And then after tinkering around a bit, she solves the MacGuffin, and oh, there's a chance. Oh, I can reunite with this person. I mean, after the Ghost Crew and all these people I worked with, we kind of grew apart after the war effort ended, left our own journeys. But with Ezra, I mean, he made the sacrifice play. He did what he did for Lothal, the true hero of Lothal, and all I ever did was snap and give him a hard time. It feels more like a sister dynamic or someone who grieves their sibling or the longing of that person, but is not in a romantic context. It's strictly platonic. Now, if when we get to part two and the other episodes, maybe later on they might squeeze, to give a little fan service to people who actually ship them. But again, I'm not a big fan of shipping myself, so I'm pretty much indifferent. So, so okay, all right. So back to the main plot. And then all of a sudden, then we okay. Forgive me if I'm going a little out of order here. I'm trying to speed run through this. So I believe this was the latter half of episode one or the beginning of the episode two. Please correct me in the comments. But then you have these fallen Jedi or dark side users, Balin Skull, and his apprentice. I forget the apprentice's name at the time of this recording, so hopefully by part two I'll remember it. But for now, I'm just going to address her as the apprentice. Anyway, Balin Skull and his apprentice pretty much break raid a New Republic starship to break out a political envoy slash criminal from the Mandalorian, which is basically Star Wars Morgan Le Fay. The reason I call her Morgan Le Fay is because, well, it's pretty much Morgan Le Fay, especially in what happens later. But I digress. I digress. At the time I recorded this, only the first four, only up to episode five, and I believe the week of episode six, if the episode doesn't end up getting delayed. But if what I remember from Mandalorian is anything to go by, I wouldn't be surprised if this character was influenced by was inspired by Morgan Le Fay, or had a deep seated connection to make her justify being at least associated, or the main catalyst villain, so to speak, or the initial threat. So this very much is so Ahsoka is very much limited in the limited series model. And trying to set up or be consistent with the sequel trilogy, even I can tell this early on is holding this series back. Like, you're just trying to remove Ahsoka from the timeline so there's no inconsistency, or you don't want to break the canon, to quote the Spider Verse movies. But even then, killing Ahsoka off would have been much better than, oh, I don't know, having her run aimlessly and then trying to be a space Jedi Ronin or something, or some bullshit like that. But I hate to curse, folks, but I'm just saying, if it ends up being like that or ends up coming to that, I would not be surprised. But I just hope that they don't try to retread, oh, I was the apprentice of the chosen one. Anakin spiraled to the dark side, committed all these atrocities. What does my legacy mean? Like, she's trying to come to herself as a Force user, despite overcoming Anakin's shadow and when he inevitably fell into becoming Vader, and the realization from that. If you remember from Rebels, she already had that realization and that character arc as far back as season two, if not carried over a little over the course of that whole season, before she was presumably killed off in on Malachor 3 at the end of that season, before Dave Filoni's World Between Worlds brought her back through Ezra's intervention. So again, this Rebels has been out for almost a decade, like seriously. And with the larger social media zeitgeist and cultural impact of Star Wars and even the sequel trilogies themselves, I really don't see how anyone could be spoiled by Rebels. Clone Wars, maybe, because Clone Wars is worthwhile. I don't want to spoil that for anyone. But Rebels is such a downgrade. Like, seriously, you could just skim off clips and get the general gist of what the hell's going on. Like, seriously. And I'm not saying that because I'm a late 90s, 2000s kid. I had better quality of shows. I'm just saying is that Rebels had a very mixed demographic and tried to have his cake and eat it too. Clone Wars was more all ages. And Rebels tried that too, but it didn't want to be. It's one thing when you're trying to be all ages to where you're pretty much catering to everyone. Oh, there's a few jokes that are going to go over the kids' heads, but the adults can look back and smirk at. But I just would have handled Rebels differently, in my opinion. But that's a story for another day. Anyway, so we okay, back to the starship. So Baylis called his apprentice, break out Megan or Morgan Le Fay. Let's just say Morgan Le Fay because again, it's Megan something. I just don't want to create any inconsistencies, especially when I have to go back and edit this. So, oh, the tag is still on. Excuse me. Anyway, so they break out Morgan, and then they try to say, "Oh, you're just a bunch of dark side wielders. You're not even real Sith. You're punks." They still, and this is the space starship commander, by the way. They're still Force users, and you still want to pick a fight with these people. Whatever happens next is because of your own stupidity. I'm just going to be honest with you. And I get it. The guy's fodder, and you need to convey some kind of threat. So, I mean, the guy pretty much didn't stand a chance. But don't have stupid dialogue like that. At least, anyway, this is not me in critiquing an official licensed product. This is me reviewing the show as it is. Okay, I don't want to bore anyone by going on that tangent, even though I'm very tempted right now. Anyway, as I was saying, so they pretty much break Morgan Le Fay out, and they want to secure the star map. But Ahsoka and Sabine Wren has it. So they go to, I believe, the planet Lothal, even though the set piece looks a lot like, Tatooine, a generic desert area. But they go to Lothal, and the apprentice picks a fight with Sabine. Okay, a brief lightsaber duel to skirmish, and then to where it alludes that although not naturally gifted or having a high Mandalorian count if we're going off the prequels, meaning basically that she discovered her source powers after that, despite the Force connecting living things in the Star Wars universe, only those who are quote unquote Force sensitive have a particular range of talent and how well they connect to it instinctively and with further training as Jedi and or Sith. So if you're going to retcon or establish that Sabine awakened her Force sensitivity through a traumatic event, say her parents were targeted and killed in the latter half of the Civil War or the latter half of the rebellion versus the Empire, to where she channeled that power in a traumatic event. Just because she's not as naturally inclined compared to the norm of Force users doesn't mean Sabine couldn't grow to be powerful in her own right or vaguely strong compared to the norm in her own right if the situation called for it. Which they kind of allude here, but they don't necessarily confirm anything. Basically, to where when this event happened, Ahsoka, gave Sabine counsel and was willing to train her, but she was concerned she was going to create another monster. She was going to create a monster in Sabine, or at the very least, create another Anakin, who would be too influenced by her emotions or by her emotions and ambitions, which was to want revenge on the people who killed her family. So, and in the precipice of that fear, Ahsoka gave into it and ultimately pushed Sabine away, which soured their Padawan master Padawan slash apprentice relationship. Even then, so that's what's alluded to, and Hera kind of stitches it into episode 2, but we're not there yet. So episode 1 pretty much wraps up with the apprentice dueling Sabine, who's rusty by not even bothering to use her lightsaber or even basic force training exercises to keep herself in shape, and she gets ducked in the abdomen. Now, proportionally or anatomically, it's arguably the gallbladder she's stabbed with, but a plasma laser sword should boil, especially if we're using prequel logic, should boil your insides or something of that nature. Even then, even then, especially Qui-Gon can attest to this, you should be dead, realistically. And no, I'm not going to go into any politics or nothing like that. This was literally just some shock value to round out the episode and gain some tension. And then it's a fake out. Oh, she survived. The wound was just hollow enough. So you mean to tell me, despite being so, if we're using in-universe logic, especially with the Disney acquisition, if we're using your logic, Sabine Wren, this post-adolescent young woman, maybe late 20s, early 30s at most, was pierced with a lightsaber in the gallbladder, excuse me, left for dead just outside her home. Lothal, government of Lothal authorities, or even Ahsoka herself, found her, rushed her to the hospital, and stabilized her before she went into shock and died. That's what you're going with. Okay. So with Qui-Gon Jinn, he was actually pierced in a vital organ. He was pierced clean through the chest cavity by Darth Maul. There was no surviving that, no matter if you used later abilities like Force Heal or if you even rushed him into a Bacta tank, because he was pierced through the chest cavity. So, and Liam Neeson had too much star power to keep him around by this point. Anyway, even then, it shouldn't be plausible unless you had Ahsoka actually use Force Heal on Sabine right then and there, and then had the hospital or medical facility treat minor wounds when she got there, when they got her there. The scene doesn't make sense. You just go from the cliffhanger, wait Q episode 2, or wait 1 week if you were still on syndication, depending if you went back and streamed it or not, if you just streamed through it or not. And oh, she's perfectly fine. I mean, she needs a couple hours to rest, but other than that, she's fine. And I'm not saying like, oh, she should have lost a limb or something like that. Maybe the fact that she hadn't any real training, she just had a basic overview of the Force and how to wield a lightsaber. And although she's a bit of a weapon specialist, a lightsaber has a different heft to it, especially when she tried to wield the dark saber in Rebels to help prove her worth and lead the Mandalorians against the Empire. Hell, she even sparred with Ezra. Granted, she only beat Ezra because she played dirty, but Ezra was growing in adolescence. This was around season 3 or so, and he was kind of being a dick anyway, so you have to take him down a peg. Even so, he was kind of being a dick, so you got to take him down a peg. Even so, she knows the basics of lightsaber combat. So I'm not saying she could hold her own against a fully blown or moderately experienced Jedi Padawan / apprentice, but she could hold her own decently. I'm not saying she should have won. I, at the very least, think the fight should have been better choreographed. But even so, hey, limited series, low budget, you do, and everything pretty much went to the CGI pretty much in the latter half, I'm assuming. So, oh, excuse me, latter half, I'm assuming. So, even then, look, they kind of been censoring and nerfing down the significance of lightsabers for a while. I don't know if it's an aesthetic choice for the sake of impact, but if you're gonna have lightsabers, now now damage has already been done for the most part, but if you're gonna use lightsabers, let them have their original impact. If someone gets mutilated or sliced, and let them have that impact. Let them have it. If you want to create a more duller, less lethal space weapon, then just do that. Don't use lightsabers just because of their iconography. What about the bow staff? What about the plasma? What about the plasma bow staffs where they just shock you? There are other creative tools to go about it. You don't have to use a lightsaber specifically just because it's more iconic. But I digress. And even then, um, even then, okay. So we're back on episode 2. I just didn't want to go on that rant. But back to episode 2. So Ahsoka and Sabine have this very, you left me, I left you. I'm not going to say it comes across as a lover spat, but someone can easily misconstrue it as one if they have no context of the prior shows. But even then, it's just like, we have to work together on this. But they have two conflicting viewpoints. They have to work together to stop the MacGuffin or destroy it. If they can't defeat these dark side force users, at the very least, they need to destroy the MacGuffin so they can't supposedly rally under Thrawn's return and start another galactic civil war or heir to the Empire like storyline. But if we're going off this limited series structure, I wouldn't be surprised that this would be a de facto prologue and then they would kick off their return to the big screen with an heir to the Empire adaptation, with Thrawn being the main villain. And since Thon Zon Zon Timothy Zahn, or apologies if I butchered his name, I don't think Ahsoka even debuted at the time those books were made. At least I believe Ahsoka debuted on the Clone Wars movie a couple years afterward, after the trilogy concluded. So I guess if you're going to adapt Heir to the Empire, you have your Ahsoka would play a and then again, I'm grasping at straws right now. We're only a few episodes in, and this is an 8 episode limited series. So I'm grasping at straws right now. But if you were going to quote unquote shelve Ahsoka to set up Heir of the Empire, I wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, so they pretty much fight Balin Skull. They at least try to figure out what happened at the New Republic. They fight Balin, and then we cut to like the back and forth between Ahsoka and Sabine. Sabine trying to practice her Force powers, and then we have Huang, the Jedi or Padawan training droid, the sentient Padawan training droid that helped younglings craft their lightsabers on Ilum from Clone Wars, and he plays a prominent role. So then we cut to. So I'm kind of just trying to skip ahead a little bit. I'm trying not to bog you with all the filler. So then Ahsoka shared this information with Hera. Hera is concerned about the possibility of the Imperial remnant being galvanized or emboldened. They go to an old trading depot, and they pretty much, and then all of a sudden, like right when they're being cornered, right when they're going through the books and the dockets, like hail the Empire, heir to the Empire, something like that, and they pretty much fire blaster bolts all over the place, like trying basically revealing themselves. And you could have like a random stooge or fodder being an idiot, and this is like greed. It's still an intergalactic enterprise, and these people need work. It doesn't matter. They still need work to provide for their families, or even then, they know the average would learn how to keep themselves. They just wanted to justify a fight scene. That whole sequence was just to justify a fight scene. Otherwise, it would just be boring exposition dump regarding how Imperial remnants felt and trying to get some interception of why they would still be loyal to the Empire, so to speak, despite the tyranny they had done on a grand scale with the Death Star and Darth Vader and all that. So that scene is largely exposition. But we do get a decent fight scene with an alleged Force user, or one with a method with like Star Killer, maybe even Ezra himself, and all these fan theories. Like, wait for the final product. Wait to see what this leads to. For all we know, this could be some Dathomir witchcraft, and this is just a reanimated corpse or some star or some space witch necromancy. Granted, I'm joking, of course, but hey, you never know. I would have to skip on ahead. And then so they go for all this, yada yada yada. They eventually catch up to Balin Skull and his apprentice, and they have this huge confrontation on this mountain range on another alien planet. And essentially, and then they have the epic lightsaber duel. Now they do have a brief battle in space. Sorry, I'm trying not to skip too much. I'm trying to make sure y'all get a decent context if y'all don't end up flowing here. So some decent CGI, maybe some wacky, a little brain scratching sequences like Ahsoka putting on a spacesuit and just larping or leaping around the hull of the ship to destroy a TIE fighter. It's supposedly trying to be badass, but why haven't we done this before? If all you had to do was put on a spacesuit and then you could force leap through space, why hasn't anyone done that? I mean, it won't change a high end space battle, but at the very least, you can avoid a close corner. You can avoid a close corner, and even then, you expose the hull of the ship in the time it takes for them to actually put on the suit, leave, close the door behind them, and then turn on the lightsaber. It's just not practical. I mean, I don't know if they didn't have enough money in the budget for a dragged out space battle, or they just did that route for the sake of time. But anyway, they end up on this alien planet, especially for another, basically to help translate and scale the star map. And so Ahsoka and Sabine catch up. They fight them. Balin throws some banter about Anakin and what he became. Ahsoka's seemingly disinterested in that. Seemingly disinterested. and but that could just be banter as the duel begins. Sabine has a rematch with the apprentice just before this and quickly catches up. Just in time for Ahsoka to lose her footing, Balin powers through and then knocks her off the ledge of a cliff. And then okay, Ahsoka falls into the ocean, is presumably dead. So okay, you have a responsibility here. Finish what he started. Only for Balin, and rest in peace to the actor. And may he rest in peace. But despite that, the show must go on. The most honorable thing to do would be to recast, but I digress. But even then, he offers you will reunite with Ezra Bridger and join basically a rendition of Kylo Ren's hand olive branch join me spiel from Last Jedi. Just slightly less cringe, in my opinion. Let me know in the context. Is this scene better or worse than Kylo Ren? Let me know in the comments. Sorry about that. Had to check something. Even so, Sabine gives him the star map, and he pretty much gets the coordinates he needs, and then you turns on his lightsaber to pretty much melt and carve the star map in two, destroying it. Okay, so we have the big dun dun dun, and then Sabine is taken prisoner, and then they prepare to scout into the distant galaxy. Oh, I almost forgot. Hera, in an attempt to intercept, avoids proper regulation, disregards the military council, or the Senate, which is a branch off of the New Republic Senate, and then leads a small squad of herself and of the Ghost, which is the ship from the Rebel series, and two starfighter and two X-wings, two maybe three if I remember correctly, and they pretty much head out to that planet. And then right when the villains escape, they get caught in this mass hyperspace sequence, to the point the whiplash pretty much sends the ship spiraling, crashing into each other, with Hera being the sole survivor. Now, Poe pulled a similar stunt, and he got a slap in the face by Leia and a demotion for his trouble. Let's see what happens with Hera. Will she lose her rank? Will she be court-martialed for desertion or leaving her post without authorization? And what reason would they have to believe? I mean, it's literally just a ghost story, a last gasp of a tyrannical force that ultimately lost power. This is it's a scare tactic at best, and even if it's somehow true, a proxy war at worst. Even then, Thawne won't have the same resources he did when the Empire was in power. So it's like, I mean, I get the vanity aspect, like you are completely underestimating Thrawn and his resources, and how capable he is. But even then, hopefully it doesn't come across as too jarring in the second half. We just know that wrapping up episode four, that Ahsoka is somehow in the world between worlds or having a near-death experience. It's not exactly clear, but we've seen this type of trope before, but like Futurama, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I think even Salem the Teenage Witch did too. Let me know in the comments. But and then we see a vision of Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. And I'm just like, if I had the clip, I'd say, member, the member berries. And I'm just like, okay, this could go one or two ways. Either this was going to be a nostalgia bent and a pure nostalgia trip, either for this episode or a good chunk of the remaining latter half of this limited series. Hopefully it's the former, and this is just for one episode. And don't just sprinkle fan service the whole time. Just give me something. Like, don't just bare minimum, in the case of lazy writing, you could retread Ahsoka's insecurities from the revelation of Anakin being Vader and Rebels. It's a retread, but at least you're getting some emotional aspect or some pretense of an arc for Ahsoka to go through, which would warrant Hayden Christensen reprising the role in live action. So even if it is a bit of a retread, I mean, come on, give me something. That's all I'm asking. But I wouldn't be surprised. Now, the official video I will do after the remaining 4 episodes have been out. That was similar to what I did for My Adventures with Superman and my collab with Taladia Plays. You'll get the first half on this channel, and then you'll get the second half in the next video, or Ahsoka Review Part 2. Now, my name is Jay Blake. Quick side note, I ended up having to go back. I just watched episode 5 and I had to go back and post. I appreciate the fan service. Now, I'm not going to go into detail because I'm actually saving this for part 2. I appreciate the fan service. Don't get me wrong. I understand what they were trying to do. And I'm sure at least every prominent YouTube channel right now is probably going to gush over it for clicks or clout or stuff like that. But I just need to get this off my chest. Like, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil the episode. But there was no substance in this episode. Episode 5, I'm telling you. Let's just say, despite the fan service, the execution was bland. The execution was bland, in my opinion. I'm not going to go too much. I don't want to spoil it. I really don't want to spoil it. But this level of fan service sprinkled in an episode with little to no substance, not cool. But hopefully this was just for, to be the low point halfway through the season or the mid-season finale. And we can go into the last 4 with a bit more oomph and a bit more stride. So, I just wanted to get that out of my chest. That before, because if I didn't, I'd end up spoiling episode 5 mid-rant, and I didn't want to do that. So, now that I've calmed down, back to the original epilogue, excuse me. Well, everyone, like I said, please like, comment, subscribe. Hit that like and hit that bell so you always know what I got coming out on the channel when you're always updated. And, well, I'm not going to play it this time. Good night, everybody. Whoa!